A test environment is an important and will be an important success factor of our test projects. Without a test environment, we cannot execute tests, and if it's not like production, what will our test results actually predict about the real behavior once we go live? The current tester has been grown up, educated using OTAP. And although there might be legacy organizations that's still not using it, it seems to be the standard for years. But this standard is under pressure. Testing in production, the nightmare of testers that did not get enough time to do the job properly before going live, seems to be high on the agendas again. And why is that? It's because systems get more and more complex, and it's more and more difficult to have an up-to-date and reliable production-like test environment. Why is that? Systems are no longer on itself, but they're all coupled. Systems are being addressed from different parts from business processes, and often organizational boundaries are being transcended. You can think about YouTube movies that are being included in a website. You can think about Google route descriptions being included. Really a good idea, but that means that services are being addressed from different parts for different purposes, and they should be working. It makes the system change more complex. Amplification is another trend which makes the system change more complex. Of course, we know apps from the App Store, and I think if you buy an app, the characteristics of the app is that it has a very limited functionality. So you buy an app for one single purpose, and if you want to do more things, you might need different apps and combine them together. And the same thing we see in the professional world, where organizations do not want to wait till the enterprise provider makes an update, but we want to have quick, fast solutions and adjusting things so we can really deliver our services again to our clients. So what we do see is that a lot of organizations address different manufacturers to buy a small thing what they need, and then they just combine it themselves. A kind of amplification, but then in professional world. The advantages are that they're more flexible and no longer depend on that one enterprise solution provider. The drawback is, of course, that even within the organizational boundaries, the system architecture becomes more and more complex. It gets more difficult actually to simulate the systems into a production-like test environment. Another thing that makes things more complicated is that we're using more devices. Where we used to have one desktop PC, now we have tablets, we got mobile phones, smartphones from different manufacturers with different generations, and we want to perform our work anywhere, anytime using those devices. So the testing matrix gets more and more complex. If we could simulate that, how much time would that take us? And how long would we be able to actually benefit from the test environment? Not that long, I think, because deployment cycles seems to get shorter each time. And we're growing more and more towards a continuous integration and a continuous deployment situation. And imagine you have a chain with a lot of different systems that work together. And you have a chain which have a lot of different organizations or suppliers that actually supply parts in the system. And they all have their own release scheme, and they're doing continuous deployment and integration. If you would be able to get that chain ready in test environment, it would be out of date. So that's why more and more people think maybe we should do some testing in production, because that's the only true production-like environment that we can generate. If you want to do that, there are some conditions that you must meet. Of course, before you start integrating systems into production, they should be of a certain quality. So testing in production does not replace all the testing that you can think of. You need to do unit testing, system testing, and then go into production. One thing that you need to do is also make a difference between test streams of data and production-like data. In the smart card industry, it was for years standard to have a flag which you could set, making the message a testing message, and you could use that in order to put it in a different pile of operational calculations and that kind of stuff. You do not want, of course, to make your management making decisions about the organization, and then in the end you have to tell them like, well, the decision that you made was based on test data, not on operational data. It could be wise, if you test in production, to have a phased deployment, where you're able to put certain parts of the system to certain parts of users. So you can make a gliding scale, get more people involved each time, but start really in a small scale. And if some errors occur in production, not all the users are actually being involved in that. And it's important that you'll be able to detect errors very quickly and you can correct them very fast. Testing in production is quite new, and terminology is still being discussed and I think still being changed. But Seth Elliott from the Testing Planet made a very nice article and described some techniques that you could use. You can look it up if you want. But some that he mentioned was dog feeding, which we all heard of, which is kind of beta testing within your own organization. He mentioned data mining, where you look in traces and loggings for anomalies in order to see whether some strange things happen. But you can thinking about synthetic tests that you make. The principle of write once an automated test and use that on different environments. And maybe you can actually run some actual tests while being in production. And of course you got the pilot and a phased start where you have a small release to a small group of users. I think we need to learn to play around with these things, because indeed it gets more difficult to get reliable test environments. And testing in production might be a very good solution, but of course we will be working on those conditions first, and that will be a task on itself. Success with that.